Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Kalia Garrido, and I head up strategic marketing and events here at HIKE2. So, if you haven't heard of us already, HIKE2 is a fully functional, best-in-class innovation consultancy, and we help regulated organizations modernize how work gets done through strategic services and enterprise delivery and engineering. And today we have a great conversation lined up for you, which is going to be all about exploring how legal teams are practically and most importantly, successfully using AI today. So before we begin, some light housekeeping. Of course, this is a webinar, so your cameras and microphones are off. But if anybody has something to say, we encourage your participation via the chat or the Q&A. And we can also reserve a little bit of time at the end of the session to ask live questions if you'd like. We are, of course, recording, and this session is going to be posted on the HIKE2 YouTube channel. And there you can find a plethora of other great legal innovation content. So I'll share the link here in the chat soon. So I'm going to start first by introducing our partner, IntelliStack. IntelliStack, you can think of it like a digital operations assistant that connects your existing software, moves information automatically so you don't have to do it a bunch of times, can create documents, collect signatures, and really just keeps business processes moving forward without people doing tons of repetitive work. And the moderator of our session today is Jordan Dimmitt. Jordan leads strategic partnerships at IntelliStack, where he is responsible for growing and strengthening the company's partner ecosystem, with a particular focus on software as a service and technology alliances with companies just like HIKE2. He is based in Denver, Colorado, and fun fact, he's a new dad. Jordan,
Hey,
please do take it away.
yeah, thank you so much. I feel like that last little bit is the most important part of that whole entire paragraph. So,
I could not
yeah,
say it. I had to say it. It's a big
yeah,
deal.
I appreciate it. And again, thank you so much for having us. And as the moderator, I play a very small part. The two real stars of the show is going to be we have Morgan Llewellyn as principal innovation practice. He brings over 20 years of AI expertise, renowned for AI strategy and innovation. Morgan's accolades include the 2021 SaaS Product of the Year and the 2022 AI and Automation Innovation Award. Morgan has successfully implemented advanced AI solutions for government agencies and Fortune 100 companies. At HIKE2, Morgan drives AI strategies and ensures the company remains a leader in AI technology and applications. Morgan, give the team a wave here.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Hi, nice to meet y'all.
And in addition to that, we have Max Brennan, and he is the VP of Corporate Counsel at IntelliStack, where he leads the legal function across commercial contracts, employment, IP, and compliance. A consistent thread through Max's career has been combining substantive legal work with legal operations and technology. He's implemented CLM, matter management, and e-billing systems at multiple companies for Fortune 500s all the way to startups, and is currently involved in building and bringing to market a CLM product at IntelliStack. He brings a practicing attorney's perspective to today's conversation, operating as a solo in-house legal team at a PE-backed SaaS company and using AI daily to scale that function. All right, Max, give everybody a wave and say hi.
Well, hello. Thanks for having me.
Perfect. And so what we're going to do today is just have a really candid, fantastic conversation. Morgan, you bring the expertise and the high level knowledge, and Max, you're the guy in the seat. And so having the conversation between you two, we can really paint the picture for what AI and legal tech looks like today. And so to kick that off, AI and legal tech, everybody's being shouted at right now, use AI, use AI. But how do you make sure you're solving real business problems instead of just implementing AI for the sake of implementing AI because you're being told to?
You want me to go ahead and take that, Jordan?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Morgan,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, let
run with
me
it.
let me take a first stab at that. So I think that's a really interesting question. And I think this is where a lot of, companies almost struggle because they're presented with this false choice, right? You're either using AI or you're not. And the reality is for all organizations, it's not as simple as use AI, don't use AI. There's a plethora of different options within, kind of that AI sphere. What does it mean to use AI? And so often what organizations are struggling with when they're being asked, hey, you need to solve real business problems. this isn't a yes or no question. This is really about search. How do you search and find the real business problem? And so it really kind of alludes almost to, often we're pre-programmed to think about business in like the Chicago economic school of, hey, you got to maximize ROI and that type of thing. Well, there's another business school, the Austrian School of Business, which is, actually the purpose of business is to search and to identify what customers want or what businesses do well. And that's really where we are when we're talking about solving real business problems with AI. This is much more of a search problem, not an optimization problem. And so so how do you go about identifying which are the right business problems to solve? Right? How do you go about saying, hey, I'm going to go and take a broad look at all the different problems we can apply AI to? And really what we see is companies doing four different things with varying levels of success. The first thing you can do as a leader to identify those business problems is use your experience, use your intuition, use your understanding of your current pain points. That's the first thing you can do. Here's a list of all the places where AI could help. Makes total sense. The other things that we see folks doing from within their organization with varying levels of success is they can try and crowdsource ideas, right? You see, hey, we're going to get everyone in a room. Let's get 10 ideas out of that room with varying levels of success. Sometimes it works out really well. Sometimes it gets really difficult. We also see some organizations doing random experiments, right? I would call this, hey, we're just going to turn on a tool, give it to people, and hopefully something comes out. Sometimes that works, often not, but sometimes it works. So those are three things you can do within your organization, right? Is lean on your experience, crowdsource ideas, random experiments, and hopefully you get lucky. The other thing that I would encourage folks to do is, and this is something I've done in the past, is lean on vendor relationships. So ask your vendors, what are they seeing? What tools are they having success with? What are the areas that they think AI is solving, business problems really well? Leverage those vendor relationships to expand your surface area, right? When you're searching for ideas, when you're searching for success, you want to expand that surface area. You want to cover as many ideas as possible, as cheaply as possible. And leveraging your vendors is kind of the shortcut that you can do to be able to look at more opportunities, more ideas without heavy investment into having to, kind of roll your own. And so that's really where I see, kind of companies approaching how do I solve the business problem? And I think there's two that are more successful, which is lean on your experience, either have a strong vision or lean on your partners and let them basically take the brunt of the effort and try and figure out what's good from the vendor space. Those are the two things I'm seeing.
I would say, just to chime in from my side, from kind of the practical standpoint, in my experience and from talking to other legal teams at conferences over the past year or so, I think a lot of legal teams are in the same spot where leadership has put budget towards AI. It is very much a strategic priority. That is great. I think a lot of attorneys see where that value comes in. I think there's a little bit of a step at this point between we have AI tools and AI actually changes how we work. And I think going into kind of the specific business problems, and I'll say from my side, I completely echo Morgan's point. I think relying on sort of your own experience and intuition around the business is a great way to start solving problems using AI. And then similarly, like as a solo legal function, partnering with vendors is huge because I'm relatively time constrained. Circling back on like what the actual business problem is, I think from my standpoint, narrowing in on it via that experience intuition route, I kind of start to think about what's the most expensive, most error prone, and or most time consuming thing that my team does that directly impacts revenue. I think that kind of goes to the Chicago school approach. For most legal teams, the answer to that is going to involve some version of what do our contracts actually say, and how do we get that information to the people who need it? That's kind of the problem, a lot of the problems that I have to solve day in, day out. And then that gets you thinking about tooling. So I think from my standpoint, it's really starting with the problem. You get a good sense of what the problem is, then you go out to the market and find a vendor that sees the problem the same way you do. I think that's one of the keys here on the vendor relationship side is that shared perspective, because AI is changing so quickly, the tech is changing so quickly, that you want someone who sees the problems the same way you do, as opposed to has a point solution today. Some thoughts from my side.
That's really so, like, when you've now, like, let's say you went the intuition route, because you both kind of like mentioned that one. And so I've identified the problem. This one is maybe the most error prone, and I've found the vendor that agrees with like my perspective. So, the puzzle pieces are together of like, we think we know which direction we want to point at. What are you guys' thoughts though when we actually look at true transformation? So now we know which direction we want to go. How do you know you're kind of making progress towards like an actual AI transformation in your organization and not just, again, using it and that's all about you doing?
I think that's a really good question. And the way I think about transformation is one component of innovation. So when I think of innovation, you can really do two things with innovation, and you can take AI as an element of innovation. And I don't think one of them is necessarily better than the other. I think it depends on your perspective. And so when you think about innovation, you can transform, right? You can transform your business. And when I say transformation, what I'm talking about there is the experience, either the employee experience or the customer experience. Like you're doing true transformation of your business. Transformation is one area of innovation. The other thing you can do is you can optimize. And that is also innovation. You can think about optimization as innovation. And so those are the two ways I think about it. You can think about this and, outside of legal, think about it as like Concorde jets, right? So Concorde said, look, I'm going to keep the same experience. We're going to fly people from Europe to the US and back, and we're just going to do it faster. We're going to do it faster than anyone's ever done it before. We are going to optimize on speed. And so that was Concorde's approach. And then you've got, British Airlines who came in and said, hey, you know what? We don't care about speed. That's not the metric we're going to optimize. In fact, we don't care about the metrics at all. We are going to create a completely different experience. We are going to transform the experience that our first class passengers have. And we're going to create the lie flat bed. And so for them, they weren't interested in optimizing speed or cost or any of these other things. They were interested in transforming the experience. And so I think for a lot of firms, when you're talking about how to use AI, the question really boils down to, do you want to optimize? And that's perfectly fine, right? And if you want to optimize, it's, what's my biggest pain point? Where's my biggest cost? And how do I use AI to solve those problems? And so you're providing relatively the same experience, maybe a little bit faster, maybe cheaper, et cetera. Or you can truly like just transform the entire experience, and you can use AI to do that. And so I think for organizations, when you talk about true transformation, you first have to make the decision, am I happy with the experience? Because if I'm happy with the experience, now it's an optimization ROI. Hey, can we do this cheaper? Can we do this faster? Can we do this better? Or do we need to take a step back and truly transform, which means it's a whole new experience. Cost is kind of secondary at that point. It's what should we do from an experience perspective? And I think you can be successful doing both. And I think there's a lot of opportunity to run just on the optimization, angle as well. So that's when I think about true transformation, I think about, innovation above that. And how do we want to innovate our organization? And when it comes to optimization, look, I think there's a lot of room to run in legal with optimization and AI tools. There's also an incredible opportunity from a transformation and experience, but that looks very different. So that's how I think about transformation and innovation more broadly. I don't know, Max, how you think about it.
Yeah, no, I think sort of a concrete example from my side in terms of optimization versus transformation. So when I started using AI for contract review, I would say that's pretty much pure optimization. Like I was still doing the same red line by red line review always done, but I was using AI to generate the first draft of red lines and comments. That saves me maybe 2 or 3 hours per heavy negotiation. That's clearly an optimization win. Like I'm doing the same work, pretty happy with it, just faster. That being said, though, because I was saving a good bit of time on the front end, that also, given that I'm a solo legal function, that frees up bandwidth to start thinking about the back end, like basically what happens after the contract is signed. And I do spend almost as much time answering questions about signed agreements as I do negotiating new ones. Like finance asks what renewal terms are, sales asks what products they're on. Um, every single time I do still have to pull up the agreement, read through it, trace an amendment chain maybe, and then email the answer back. So I'm sort of the human search engine there. I think that that's starting to get me thinking around like how do I actually transform the experience for the folks in sales and finance trying to get that information from me. And I think the optimization wins can kind of help inform what the transformation might look like and also gives you a bit more time to work on it, which is both good in my experience.
That's perfect. So I love a good story, and you guys are like teeing this up nicely of like, we made our decision was kind of that first question. And through this one, you guys are like, all right, you know what? We're doing the lay down bed technique of what we want to do from transforming our experience. So you kind of get going on that. And Max, you kind of gave those real examples of, what can we do in those first 60 to 90 days now that we've made our decision. But when you're an organization that's implementing AI, yes, those 60 to 90 days are great and they're probably full of a lot of excitement. But what you're probably looking for is stability in what you're building. And so, like, we want this to be something that's going to be used in the next 190, 300 and onward. So, what do you guys think about like the stability stage of an AI transformation?
Yeah, I can jump in and lead Max,
Yeah.
give my initial thought. So when I think about stability of AI transformation, scalability, there's a lot of different directions you can go, right? And often people go really deep, really fast of, well, what does it mean to, govern these things? What does it mean to have good data, right? Like good data is the thing that people always talk about first. Like you've got all these like very technical things. And in my experience, all those things are secondary. They almost don't matter if you don't have the one thing that's absolutely necessary, which is vision. Vision of where this thing is going, right? What does done look like? If we're doing optimization, what does done look like? If we're doing transformation, what does done look like? And having a clear vision that you can communicate to, to your team, to yourself, to your leadership, to your vendors, et cetera. And so having a vision. So let me give you an example from kind of that HR tech space I was in. Our vision was we were going to use every piece of information we could safely use that was in a resume. We are going to stop using parsers. That was it. That was kind of our vision. We're going to stop using parsers and we're going to use full resumes and we're going to take that full resume into the, kind of the job search process. That was the vision. So we had this, here's what the end state looks like. And then we built everything up into that. I think where a lot of organizations struggle is they don't have the vision. They're going to try this, they're going to try that. Hey, a pilot was successful. And now what? Right? Like, hey, I had a successful pilot. Okay, well, what comes after that? There's a really nice book from, I believe his name is Inder Sidhu. I might have butchered that and I apologize. But he was a senior VP at Cisco, back in the day. And he has this book called Doing Both, where he talks about this need to simultaneously, do the job you're required to do while innovating. You can't sacrifice good experience at the expense of future innovation. And so I think a lot of organizations struggle with how do I have a vision that aligns with what I have to do and where I want to go. And so now if we come back to that list of, well, how do you search for AI opportunities? How do I go about developing that vision? It really comes down to you got two opportunities to do that. You can, again, use your experience and your intuition, kind of like Max was talking about, or you can get insights from, leaders in your space, vendors, competitors, et cetera. And those are the two places to really go to develop a vision. But without a vision of where you're going to take this, you're not going to be able to scale it because you don't know your end destination and everything else you're doing, whether it's data, whether it's, governance, whether it's training, all of that's done myopically. And so have a strong vision is what I would suggest.
Completely agreed, Morgan. From my side, like I think that there's an interesting interplay between kind of the vision and the technology and tools right now, insofar as like the tech space is changing so quickly that kind of my vision for what the ideal outcome is and what's possible is kind of changing relatively dynamically. Um, so just to share kind of my ideal vision for an end state for our use of AI, um, like my ideal vision would be a world where the executed contract basically automatically populates the rest of the enterprise, both for information finding and then ideally for like agentic decision making. So agreement gets signed, pricing terms automatically generate the right invoice on the finance system side, user entitlements update in the product backend. It also starts off renewal workflows before the expiration. But the key to actually making that work, and I think this echoes sort of a consistent point that Morgan brought up, is around the data cleanliness. Um, so, like, in order to achieve that transformational vision, I would need to have really high trust in the semantic data that's pulled out of those contracts because they're actually going to start driving business outcomes. And I think sort of that vision is sort of the ideal end state. Working backwards from that in terms of the tools today, the tools as they might exist 3 months, 6 months from now, I think that's a particular pain point. And here, to echo Morgan's point, like this is where vendors and partners who work in this space all the time have been a huge resource for me in terms of figuring out what tools might actually help in that regard, where the market is going, et cetera.
If I can just say, look, Max nailed that on the head, right? He's got a vision. And then he says, in order to achieve this vision, here's the requirements I have, right? And data is absolutely one of them. But it wasn't, I need to make my data perfect. It wasn't the org has to understand all the data. It's here's the data I need. And so this is what it's going to take for me to be able to succeed in my vision is my data. And this is the specific data. I think that was awesome, Max. Really well articulated.
No, appreciate it, Morgan. And I think that that also kind of pulls out one of the interesting market dynamics that I think I've been seeing over the past 2, 3 months is cost of tokens going up pretty much across all LLM providers. And so if you, to Morgan's point, figuring out exactly what data matters to you, what data matters for the transformation is going to be really important because you don't want to spend a whole bunch of tokens boiling the ocean and have no business results at the end of it.
So, I'm gonna latch on to that very last thing you said there, using a bunch of tokens and having no real results. Everybody loves a little bit of a blooper reel. So in both of your experiences, the having the vision, kind of executing on the transformation, it's not a super clean line. And a lot of people don't get from A to Z on their first shot. So where are you all seeing like companies, fail's a strong word, but where are you seeing companies like trip or stumble along their journey and having to take those steps back?
I love the blooper reel analogy. I think that's really good. And I think blooper, maybe that's not fair, right? Because I think the space is moving so fast and at some level maturing very quickly that things that were good decisions 2 years ago maybe don't make sense anymore. And so one of those bloopers I'd throw out there kind of to begin with is I'm going to go do it myself, right? I'm going to go do all the integration. I'm not going to build an LLM, but I'm going to go build all the integrations and I'm going to, create you hear this one out there a little bit. I'm going to create my own CRM, right? It's like, oh, okay, you could go do that. But you're a SaaS company or you're a manufacturing company. Is that really core to your identity? And so I think the first blooper that I see a lot, and I think it's starting to edge out, but I think if you're doing it today, you really do need to pause, which is I'm going to go build it myself. I think that's one. I think the other challenge we see a lot of organizations have, and this maybe speaks back to something that we talked about before, is okay, I rolled out my pilot or I've had a successful initial product. Now what? Right? I'm a one-hit wonder. I was able to roll this out. I had some success, but I don't know what comes next. Right? I haven't actually thought through this whole chain of events and experiences, et cetera. And so I think that's another, kind of gap and challenge organizations have. And then I think the other one I would throw out there is really gaps in innovation experience in organizations that limit their upside potential. And what I mean by that is, and I've seen this in a number of organizations that I've been through, kind of throughout my career, is innovation's hard. And innovation takes experience, right? Whether we're innovating with AI, whether we're innovating with automation, whether it's Lean Six Sigma optimization, doesn't matter, right? It's all innovation. And there are certain patterns to how to go about doing innovation. And a lot of organizations have, more or less squeezed innovation out, right? They become so efficient over time that they've kind of squeezed innovation out. And the people who really enjoy innovation self-selected out and went elsewhere. And so I think a lot of organizations today maybe have gaps in their innovation experience, and this can limit their upside potential, right? And when I say gaps in their innovation experience, I mean, whether it be from a governance perspective, from a data perspective, from a customer experience perspective, or just a pilot and training perspective, there's gaps in that, kind of in that life cycle. And so how do they go about filling some of those gaps? So I think those are three issues. And I'll give you one opportunity to kind of address all three. Whether it's I'm going to build it myself, whether it's I've rolled out a product, now what, or I've got gaps in my experience around training, et cetera. One thing you can do is look at, and again, I say this from experience, not from self-service or kind of pushing your company, Jordan, is lean on your tech vendors. You can lean on your tech vendors because they can bear some of that build burden. B, they can give you ideas of what to do next. And C, they're innovating all the time, right? They're having to innovate to put these, to put these programs together, to put these new tools together. And so you can leverage them to be able to, fill some of those gaps. So, and that would be the one thing I would say is a solution to the bloopers that I offered. Max, you probably have 100 others, is lean on tech vendors because they can really address those first two.
Yep. So from my side, absolutely. Thinking back, like when I've done previous CLM implementations, I did, like days before AI, I did sort of exactly to this point, a home built kind of vibe coded CLM solution in Jira. It worked fine. It was not great. At this point, I think, and so I kind of took that approach into the AI space. And when AI first came out, I started sort of similarly vibe coding a solution, and very quickly kind of hit the limit in terms of like the big things that I focus on as an attorney are consistency and trust in the output of a tool. And the vibe coded tools that I was working with just didn't have that level of consistency and trust that I could really leverage. Like I can leverage them given my judgment and experience, but I can't turn this loose on the organization and allow it to act independently of me. That just isn't going to work. And so personally, I got lucky and I came and joined IntelliStack, where we were actually working on these problems. And so I got to benefit from working at a company where we are actually innovating in this space. And to Morgan's point, like I didn't have the engineering resources, the iteration cycles, all of these pieces. I didn't have the budget to build a tool that really worked well. So yeah, I think the vendor side, both partners and the actual tech vendors, they do like the space is maturing so rapidly, the tech is maturing so rapidly that they've developed really solid domain expertise over the past few years that they can deploy to help your organizations. I've seen that firsthand here. And so, yeah, I think that's a good path.
So the pace of innovation, the speed of everything, that's been a common theme that you guys have both mentioned multiple times. So, you know, Morgan, like Hike2 being that like thought leader in the space, being that party that they can lean on, that can help kind of be their compass, guide their vision in the right direction that they want to go. And Max being the guy in the seat from the company that's trying to innovate in this market. You guys are sitting at a table. Where are you putting your chips on like the future? So like, what are you making your bets on of like, this is where this is going to go. This is maybe where somebody could be thinking about.
Go for it, Morgan.
Yeah, I keep coming back to one word, which is experience. So if we think about everything that's happened in transformation and experience, so if we think about everything that's happening from a technology perspective, we used to engage with tools, right? That then engage with databases and documents, and we engage with a number of tools. And every engagement with a tool, a software product, a human, et cetera, every one of those was kind of one-on-one. And that created an experience. Tomorrow, our experience is going to be very different, where all these tools are going to be interacting with agents. And so we're going to be shifting the experience from this very personalized, I'm interacting with a software product, to my agent is now interacting with a software product on my behalf. And so focusing on experience and what that means for in-house counsel, for outside counsel, I think is the thing to focus on. And in particular, I would put a bet out there or a vision out there so far that it's almost impossible to be wrong. And for example, what I would say is, bet on an experience where agents are going to be at least maybe not fully procuring, but at least reviewing RFPs if you're in-house counsel, right? How do you have an agent be able to review all the RFPs and be able to shortlist the companies? Like put a big bet out there on agentic experience. If you're in-house, sorry, if you're outside counsel, how do you put in place an experience where your firm can be reviewed by an agent, right? To Max's point, this experience is really important because it's how easy is your information to find? How expensive in tokens does it cost to have that information be found? If you're a law firm, if you're in-house counsel, how efficient can I make that search? Because I don't want to spend $1 million in my RFP search, right? I want to make that experience easy. And so if I were in the legal space, what I would bet on is how do we have agents be able to essentially peruse a shelf of legal services and be able to select the right legal service, whether that legal service be outside counsel, whether that legal service be some AI tool, et cetera. How do we allow an agent to be able to review what's on the shelf and to be able to select the right service and put that in front of in-house counsel? If I'm a law firm, I'd be really interested in how do I make sure the right information ends up on that shelf? Because if I'm not on the shelf, if I can't be purchased by an agent, I might be outside of the conversation. So that's what I would bet on is a fundamental transformation in the experience of how legal services are being bought and sold.
I share that same vision, and I hope we get there soon. From my side, I would say, like, just to echo a couple of Morgan's points and kind of building into my thoughts on the future here. What's really changed, I think, kind of the fundamental shift is AI has made it much more economically feasible to populate data at scale. So, like, the work of reading contracts, identifying obligations, mapping relationships, that used to require an army of first-year associates or consultants. Now you can have those specialized AI agents reviewing the doc, populating the information, running consistency checks, validating output. I don't know that it's ever, well, ideally it would be fully autonomous, but just given the risks involved, I think there's still some level of human review, but the cost has dropped so dramatically. And I think that then starts to feed into what Morgan was saying, which is a real kind of change in CLM and a lot of like business process automation softwares as a category. I think, and here going to the experience of the thing, I think like traditional click-through screens, filling in metadata, routing for approval, that's all mostly going to flatten and move into the background. And so ideal future state from my side is like where I and the other folks can stay in the tools that they want to stay in, like Salesforce, have a conversation with an AI assistant that works across the org, and then the workflows happen behind the scenes. Like our folks don't have to navigate a workflow builder. They don't have to fill in screens of intake data, describe what I need, system builds, human reviews and approves. That, in my view, is like a pretty fundamentally different user experience from what is out there today. So ideally, we'll get there, but it does require a lot of trust and consistency for me to get comfortable with it.
That's perfect. You heard it here, folks. Those two things, book them. Go to Vegas, place your bets on them now. They're happening. And also, it just sounds like Morgan's looking for somebody to grocery shop for him. He's kind of hoping that's what the agents get to, is just goes to the store, get the things off the shelf for him, and he doesn't have to worry about it.
Jordan, you just hit the one thing I don't want AI. I love grocery shopping. That is
Oh,
my
really?
guilty secret. I love, if I could go to the grocery store every day, I absolutely would.
What? Tell us more about that, Morgan. Why?
No, I just enjoy it. I enjoy the I just enjoy the experience. But what I was going to say is, coming back, throughout this talk, something that, is if you can put together a vision like Max can, and you have an understanding of the tools you have available, I mean, you've really set yourself up for success, and you've given yourself options and paths, right? So there's a number of, different approaches Max can, he knows where he wants to go, and he knows the set of tools that can take them there, or he has awareness at least to be able to go and have the conversations. And so, I think if you could set yourself up like Max, I think you're in really good shape if you're at kind of a legal in-house counsel, and so yeah, Max, I think that everything you're saying is incredible.
No, I appreciate Morgan. And from my side, I would just say like I feel relatively atypical in the space because I like to build legal ops processes. I like to work in these tools a lot. I don't want to assume that about all attorneys, and so that's where like the partnership and the vendor side is so critical. Like I like the space, a lot of attorneys don't, and so if you find someone who really enjoys the space and can think strategically and transformationally with you, I think that's a huge benefit.
I think what I heard is if you're listening to this call and you're looking to have that conversation, Max is a good person to have a conversation with.
Yep, and then I will probably point you to HIKE2 to actually help do it.
That's perfect. We'll always have to end on shameless plugs. And I know Kelly just put in the chat, but does anybody have any questions that they would want to ask Morgan or Max?
I think this was a great talk, guys. While we're waiting to see if anybody has any specific questions they'd like to ask, I think it's a really good peek into where the world is heading. And the one liner that Morgan dropped at the end is just be like Max.
Be like Max.
Be like, go to the grocery store every day like Morgan, and be like Max when it comes to legal ops and being curious about what's out there in legal processes.
I can't remember. So I did reference him, and I should give him some attribution. Some Rory Sutherland, he's a marketer, and I talked a little bit about one of the examples with the Concord that he brings up. But the Be Like Max, that is a different marketer out of Chicago, and I met the gentleman a long time ago who came up with the Be Like Mike slogan.
Nice.
And so anyway, Be Like Max is the new Be Like Mike. If anyone remembers that old Gatorade campaign.
I do. Cool. Thank you guys so much for the conversation today. Jordan, thank you for leading us through everything. Max and Morgan, thank you for sharing your brain trust with us. And thank you to everybody who listened in or is watching this later on YouTube. We appreciate you guys giving us your attention. We know it's in short supply these days.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.